In the peaceful village of Zalunga, surrounded by green hills and bright flower fields, the birth of a baby girl brought both happiness and silent whispers. Her name was Ayira, meaning the light of the morning, and she was born to Chief Bako, the respected village elder, and his gentle wife, Kanua. The villagers came to celebrate her arrival with drums and singing, but behind their smiles, there were quiet murmurs. Some old villagers said Ayira carried the mark of her mother's past, a past that no one dared to speak of openly, not even to her husband, Chief Bako. Kanua was loved by many for her kindness, but there was a strange silence whenever her name was mentioned in the presence of elders from distant lands. It was as if her life had a chapter torn out, a mystery buried deep. Still, Kanua showered her daughter with love and raised her with care and warmth. Little Ayira grew up laughing and running through the compound, her tiny feet tapping the earth like music. Her smile was like sunshine, and everyone could see she was special. But fate does not leave such a soul untouched for long. As Ayira grew, her life seemed simple and peaceful. She played in the fields, helped her mother grind millet, and listened to stories under the moonlight. But deep within the walls of their home, a silent storm was waiting. It began the day Kanua fell ill. No one could explain what sickness it was. Some said it was a curse from the past catching up with her. Others whispered that her spirit was never fully free from whatever she ran from in her younger. Chief Bako, broken and confused, did all he could, but Kanua's strength faded day by day. When Ayira was only 5, Kanua took her final breath under the baobab tree, holding her daughter's small hands in hers. Her last words were, "Never let anyone make you feel less than who you are, my child." Ayira didn't understand the meaning then, but those words would stay in her heart forever. After Kanua's death, everything changed. Chief Bako, overwhelmed with grief and loneliness, decided to take another wife. That decision would change Ayira's life in ways no one could imagine. The woman he brought into their home was Lenda, a striking woman from the north with a sweet voice and sharp eyes. But behind her beauty hid a cold heart. From the very beginning, Lenda's eyes never softened for Ayira. She saw the little girl not as a stepdaughter, but as a shadow of the woman she secretly envied and despised. Lenda's smiles were only for Chief Bako. For Ayira, there were harsh words, cold glances, and silent punishments. Ayira, once the center of warmth in the house, now lived in a corner of fear. She was blamed for every little mistake. Even when her half-siblings were born, Itana and Jorik, Ayira became nothing more than a servant in her own home. But the worst pain wasn't just in the chores or the beatings. It was in the words Lenda whispered to her every time she cried, "You're suffering for your mother's sins. You'll never rise above her shame." Still, Ayira didn't break. Deep inside, something stronger was growing, something that no hatred could kill. A silent fire, a hidden strength, a destiny that even Lenda could not destroy. Ayira didn't know it yet, but she was about to become the girl who would rise beyond pain and rewrite her fate. Kanua was known in Zalunga as a woman of beauty, grace, and quiet strength. She moved through the village with soft steps and a gentle voice, always carrying herself with dignity. People admired her calm nature, but few truly knew what pain she had buried behind her warm smile. Her past was a secret wrapped in silence, a chapter she never wanted to revisit. But the truth was, Kanua had not always belonged to Zalunga. Long before she became the wife of Chief Bako, she had lived in a distant village called Kafuro, a place with strict traditions and powerful elders who ruled with fear. In her youth, Kanua had been chosen by the House of Elders to become the spiritual bride of the High Priest of Kafuro. It was a sacred but terrifying tradition, one that demanded total obedience and silence from the chosen woman. Kanua, full of life and dreams, could not accept that fate. She was not born to be locked in shadows, serving a priest under rules that chained her spirit. On the night before the ritual, she made a daring escape. She ran through the forest, barefoot and afraid, leaving everything behind, her family, her name, and her past. She fled far from Kafuro, eventually finding her way to Zalunga, where no one knew her story. There, she met Chief Bako, who was drawn to her kindness and mystery. He never asked about her past, and she never spoke of it. They married, and for a while, it seemed that the ghosts of Kafuro had been left behind. But some things cannot be buried forever. Whispers began to follow Kanua, carried by travelers who had once passed through Kafuro. Some villagers overheard strange conversations, old men speaking in hushed tones about a woman who had shamed the gods. Still, Kanua remained quiet, focusing on her daughter, Iyira, and pretending not to hear the growing murmurs. But fate had not forgotten what she had escaped. When Iyira turned 5, a strange sickness gripped Kanua. It came suddenly. One moment she was laughing with her daughter, and the next, she was coughing blood and losing strength. Healers tried everything, but nothing worked. Some said it was a curse sent from Kafuro to punish her for breaking tradition. Others believed the guilt and fear she had buried for years had finally eaten away at her soul. As her body grew weaker, her eyes often filled with sadness, not for herself, but for her daughter. She feared that Iyira might one day suffer for the sins she never committed. Chief Bako was shattered. He loved Kanua deeply, but she slipped away from him day by day. He never understood the real reason behind her illness, and she never told him. Even on her deathbed, Kanua held the secret tightly. She died with pain in her heart and worry in her spirit, whispering to Iyira to stay strong, to rise no matter what came her way. Her death left a hole in the family that nothing could fill. And while the village mourned, the unseen curse of Kanua's past quietly planted roots. Roots that would one day twist Iyira's path in ways no one could imagine. 1 year after Kanua's quiet passing, the once warm and lively home of Chief Bako felt empty. The walls that used to echo with laughter now sat in silence. The village elders began pressuring Chief Bako to remarry, saying a man of his status should not remain alone. Eventually he agreed, and not long after, he brought home a new wife, Lenda, a tall, striking woman from the northern lands of Jolobi. Her beauty was the talk of the village. Her voice was soft, her steps graceful, and her smile calm. But beneath all that, there was a coldness that only time would reveal. At first, Iyira watched her with innocent eyes, hoping to find the same warmth she once felt with her mother. But from the very first day Lenda stepped into the compound, something felt different. The air grew heavier, the smiles felt forced. Lenda's eyes rarely met Iyira's, and when they did, they were sharp and distant. There was no motherly affection, no kind words, only stiff silence and hidden glances of disdain. Lenda had heard whispers, rumors about Kanua's past, about the defiance she had shown to the traditions of Kafuro. And though she never spoke of it openly, she believed those rumors. In her heart, she saw Iyira not as a child, but as a reflection of a woman she judged without knowing. She believed Iyira carried the same curse, the same shame, and she used that belief to justify her cruelty. Slowly, things began to change in the household. Lenda started giving Iyira extra tasks. First, it was fetching water and sweeping the compound. Then it became pounding yam, scrubbing floors, washing clothes, cooking meals, all while Lenda sat in the shade, sipping palm wine or resting on a mat. Iyira, still just a young girl, worked from sunrise to sunset, her small hands growing rough with blisters. But worse than the chores were the words. Lenda would whisper cold insults when no one was listening. "You're just a shadow of your cursed mother. No one will ever love a girl like you." Soon, Lenda gave birth to 2 children, Itana and Jorik. Their arrival sealed Iyira's fate. The little girl, who once ran freely through the compound, now became nothing more than a servant. She was told not to eat until the others had eaten. She was scolded for every mistake, even those made by Itana and Jorik. While they played, Iyira worked. While they laughed, Iyira cried in silence. Chief Bako, blinded by Lenda's beauty and charm, failed to see the truth. Lenda wore a mask in front of him, a gentle smile, a respectful tone. He believed she was keeping the home in order, raising his children well, and showing discipline. But behind his back, she was turning Iyira's world into a prison. Iyira never dared to complain. She swallowed her pain, hid her tears, and obeyed every command. But inside her heart, something strong was forming. A quiet fire, a silent strength, a will that refused to break. Even though she was treated like nothing, Iyira held on to her mother's last words, to never forget her worth. She didn't know how or when, but deep inside, she believed that one day she would rise from this pain. One day, she would prove that no curse could destroy a heart filled with light. Lenda's cruelty did not stay hidden for long. It grew like a creeping vine, tightening around Ayira's life with every passing day. At first, it was just cold stares and harsh words, but soon it became something much worse. Lenda's hands, once soft and graceful, turned into weapons of anger. She found any excuse to punish Ayira. If a clay pot slipped from Ayira's hands and shattered, Lenda's slap would come before the shards even hit the ground. If the broom was not in its proper place, Lenda would grab a stick and strike her legs. If Itana or Jorik wasted food, Lenda would twist Ayira's ear and hiss, "You should have stopped them. Now you will sleep hungry." Ayira, still just a child, learned to live in silence. She learned to move quickly, to never make mistakes, to avoid Lenda's gaze when anger flashed in her eyes. But no matter how careful she was, no matter how much she obeyed, it was never enough. Lenda's hatred was not just about broken pots or misplaced things. It was deeper. Every time she raised her hand, every time she let out a cruel word, it was as if she was not just punishing Ayira, but punishing the ghost of Kanua. "You are just like your mother," Lenda would spit, her voice sharp like a knife. "A woman with no place, a woman who brought shame. You will never rise above her shadow." Ayira did not understand. What sin had her mother committed? What crime had she done that even in death, her name still carried such hatred? But Ayira had no one to ask, no one to protect her. Chief Bako, once a strong and respected man, had grown old and weak. His shoulders, once broad with pride, were now hunched with the weight of years. His eyes, once sharp like an eagle's, now looked away when Ayira's cries filled the house. He did not see, or perhaps he chose not to. At first the villagers whispered. They saw the bruises, the way Ayira limped sometimes, the way her once bright eyes now held shadow, but they said nothing. After all, Lenda was the chief's wife, and no one dared to interfere in the affairs of a man's household. And so, Ayira's cries became echoes, swallowed by the silence of shame. She carried her pain alone, her small hands covering her wounds, her heart growing colder with every beating. But deep inside, beneath the bruises and the sorrow, something else was forming. It was not hatred. No, hatred would make her just like Lenda. It was not revenge. No, revenge would only make her a prisoner of her past. It was something stronger. It was the quiet promise that one day she would prove them all wrong, that she would rise, not in her mother's shadow, but in her own light. Ayira was no longer the little girl who cried silently in the corner. At 13, she had blossomed into a graceful young woman, her eyes still carrying the quiet pain of years, but also a strength that even Lenda's cruelty could not crush. She moved like the wind, calm, soft, unnoticed. But behind that calmness was a storm of silent dreams and secret struggles that no one knew. Every day, Ayira worked harder than anyone in the house. She woke before the first cockcrow, fetched water, cooked, cleaned, and cared for her half-siblings like a maid. Yet, she never complained. Her heart was heavy, but her spirit stayed gentle. She knew that if she let anger consume her, she would lose herself. So she carried her pain like a cloak, invisible to others, but heavy on her shoulders. What no one knew was that Ayira had a secret. Whenever she finished her chores and the world went to sleep, she would sneak away with torn pieces of paper she collected from the village streets. Some had faded writing, others were old school notes thrown away by village children. To others, it was trash, but to Ayira, it was treasure. She used those scraps to teach herself how to read and write. She'd sit under the moonlight with a stick in her hand, tracing letters in the sand, whispering words to herself softly so no one would hear. She practiced every night, sometimes using charcoal from the cooking fire to scribble on broken calabash pieces. The more she practiced, the better she became. Her fingers became swift, her letters neater, her words more beautiful. Her calligraphy, though written in sand, had a charm, a silent beauty that could speak louder than voices. She even started writing short poems in her head, poems about her mother, about the pain in her heart, about the strength she was quietly building. She didn't know why, but writing made her feel free, like she was bigger than the walls of her suffering, like she was meant for more than just washing pots and carrying firewood. But no one saw this side of her. To everyone in the house, Ayira was just the silent girl, the servant, the cursed child. Her father, Chief Bako, barely spoke to her anymore. Lenda only saw her as a burden. Itana and Jorik laughed at her torn clothes and mocked her dreams. No one knew that this same girl was slowly carving a future for herself with every letter she wrote in the sand. But one night, as Iyira sat beneath the old mango tree behind the compound, tracing a poem into the soil with her stick, someone watched her silently. A pair of eyes saw what no one else did: her grace, her strength, her secret fire. It wasn't a spirit or a shadow, but a wandering soul passing through Zalunga, a young traveller who had stopped in the village for rest, and unknowingly stumbled upon the girl who was quietly building wings in the dark. That night, as the moon glowed brighter than usual, Iyira didn't know that her silent struggle had finally been seen. She didn't know that her story was about to take a turn. A journey that began with tears was quietly walking towards something greater, and though the world still saw her as nothing, destiny had begun to notice her shine. It was a hot afternoon, and Iyira had just finished washing a pile of clothes by the riverbank. Her arms ached, her feet were sore, and her stomach rumbled from the little food she had eaten that morning. As she was packing the wet clothes into an old basket, she noticed a figure stumbling near the water's edge. It was an old man, hunched and frail, struggling to stand. Within seconds, he collapsed to the ground. Without a second thought, Iyira dropped her basket and rushed to him. She sprinkled water on his face, gently lifted his head, and fanned him with her wrapper. The man's skin was dry, his lips cracked, and his breathing weak. She tore a piece of cloth from her wrapper and dipped it in water, pressing it to his forehead. After several minutes, the old man finally opened his eyes. He blinked, confused, then looked at Iyira with deep, searching eyes. There was something different about him, something powerful, yet peaceful, like he carried the wisdom of many lifetimes. He sat up slowly, his voice trembling but clear. You saved me," he said softly. Iyira smiled shyly. "I only did what I could, Baba. You needed help." The man chuckled faintly, still catching his breath. Most would have walked past. "But you have the heart of royalty." Iyira was confused. Royalty. She looked down at her torn wrapper, her dusty feet, her calloused hands. What royalty could he be talking about? "I am Zawadi," he continued, "a sage from the kingdom of Njoro. I travel not just through lands, but through destinies, and today I have met yours." Before Iyira could respond, he reached into the folds of his robe and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. Inside was a carved wooden pendant, simple, yet strangely beautiful. It had the shape of a flame and was tied with a piece of braided leather. He held it out to her and said, "When your day comes, wear this pendant. It will guide you to your true place. Your destiny will recognize you, even if the world does not." Iyira hesitated. She had never received anything so special before. Her hands trembled as she took the pendant. She didn't fully understand his words, but there was something in the way he spoke, calm, powerful, full of meaning, that made her believe. Elder Zawadi stood up, now stronger, and gave her a gentle nod. "Thank you, child. May the winds of destiny lift you high." Then, just like that, he walked away, disappearing down the dusty road. Iyira stood still, holding the pendant close to her chest. Her heart beat faster than usual. Something had shifted. She could feel it. That evening, she hid the pendant in an old calabash under the floor of her hut. She didn't want Lenda or anyone else to find it, but every night before she slept, she would secretly hold it in her hand and remember Elder Zawadi's words. She didn't know how or when her destiny would come, but for the first time in her life, Iyira had hope, a flicker of light in her darkness. A stranger's kindness had planted a seed in her heart, and though the world still treated her like nothing, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was meant for something far greater. As Iyira turned 16, something within her began to grow stronger, like a fire refusing to be put out. Her days were still filled with endless chores, harsh words, and cold meals, but her heart beat with silent hope. She often clutched the wooden pendant Elder Zawadi had given her, whispering to it in the quiet nights, believing it held some kind of strength. One morning, news spread across the village like wildfire. The royal palace of Njoro was organizing a grand competition. It wasn't just about talent, it was about wisdom, leadership, grace, and strength of character. The winner would be chosen as a royal apprentice and might even be considered for a future marriage into the royal family. It was an opportunity that could change someone's life forever. The entire village buzzed with excitement. Families began preparing their sons and daughters. Noble homes hired tutors, tailors, and coaches. It was the talk of every market stall and every evening fire. When Iya heard the news, her heart skipped a beat. Could this be what Elder Zawadi meant by, "When your day comes"? With trembling courage, she approached Lenda and said, "Mama, I want to join the royal competition." Lenda burst into laughter so loud, even the chickens scattered. "You," she mocked. "You think the palace will even let a cursed broom girl like you walk past their gates? You are nothing but dirt under their feet." Iya lowered her eyes, but inside, her spirit didn't shake. That night, after finishing her chores and pretending to sleep, she quietly slipped out into the moonlight. There, by the old tree near the river, she began to train. She practiced her speech with the wind as her audience, spoke to the stars like they were judges, and used her reflection in the water to practice poise. She sang softly, letting her voice dance in the silence. She read old papers she had secretly collected, memorized stories from the elders, and rehearsed answers to questions that could be asked. She trained like a warrior preparing for battle. Every night, tired and hungry, she pushed herself. She had no silk gown or golden necklace, but her strength was her mind, her heart, and the wisdom she had carved from pain. No one saw the sweat on her brow or the tears on her cheeks. No one heard the words of encouragement she whispered to herself in the dark. But with each passing night, Iya transformed. Her voice became confident, her presence became graceful, her knowledge deepened, and most importantly, her belief in herself grew stronger than ever. Each time she wore the pendant during her practice, she felt a warmth in her chest, like destiny was watching her, cheering her on. Even though Lenda and her children mocked her, Iya didn't stop. Even though she returned each morning to the same cruel treatment, she didn't break, because deep inside, she knew her time was coming. She knew she was more than what they saw. She wasn't just the girl cleaning floors or washing dishes. She was the girl who dared to dream beyond pain. The girl who rose in silence. The girl who was slowly becoming something no one could stop. Unstoppable, unshakable, unforgettable. And soon, the world would know her name. The long-awaited day finally arrived. The day that would change everything. Before sunrise, Iya wrapped herself in her late mother's old wrapper, the only piece of dignity she owned. Her feet were bare, but her spirit was strong. With quiet determination, she walked miles to Njoro, carrying nothing but hope and the pendant Elder Zawadi had once given her. When Iya entered the palace gates, the crowd turned to stare. She didn't wear silk or shine with gold like the other contestants, but there was something different about her, something graceful and pure. The judges, including the respected elders and Prince Kulan himself, sat in grand chairs, watching each contestant display their talents. Some sang, some recited poems, some demonstrated leadership skills. But when it was Ayira's turn, the entire hall fell silent. Her voice was steady, her words were powerful, her intelligence, charm, and natural leadership stunned everyone in the room. Prince Kulan leaned forward, deeply impressed by this mysterious girl from Zalunga. He whispered to one of the judges, "There's light in her eyes, a strength not taught, but born." Whispers of admiration filled the royal chambers. Iya had clearly won hearts. Even those who came with prejudice now nodded in respect. But in the shadows, Lenda's jealousy burned like wildfire. She had followed Iya secretly and couldn't believe what she was seeing. The same girl she had treated like dirt now standing like a queen in front of royals. Determined to ruin everything, Lenda acted fast. She bribed one of the palace servants and handed him a dark task: to tamper with Ayira's score sheet and sabotage her final performance. The servant did as instructed, slipping the real score into his pocket and replacing it with a falsified one that made Iya look unqualified. When the results were announced, a hush fell over the hall. Ayira's name was not on the list of finalists. Instead, she was declared disqualified for incomplete submission and poor performance. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Even Prince Kulan looked confused. Iya stood frozen, her heart crushed. Laughter and whispers began again, this time mocking her. She turned away, tears running down her face, her dreams shattered in an instant. But destiny was not done with her yet. Just as Iyira walked out of the palace gates, a familiar voice stopped her. Elder Zawadi, now a royal advisor, had witnessed the strange shift in the results. He had watched Iyira's performance and knew something was terribly wrong. Without delay, he approached the High Council and demanded a private re-evaluation. The royal court agreed. Secretly, Iyira's original score sheet was found, hidden in the servant's pocket. The servant, trembling, confessed everything. Under pressure, he revealed Lenda's name and the bribe she had given him. The palace guards immediately arrested him, and Lenda's name was exposed before the royal council. The judges were stunned. The court summoned Iyira back into the hall. This time, she entered not in shame, but with honor. Elder Zawadi stood beside her as her rightful scores were read aloud, the highest among all the contestants. The entire palace erupted in applause. Iyira was no longer just a village girl. She was the star they almost buried, the flower that bloomed from the dust, and the voice that couldn't be silenced. Iyira was called back into the royal hall, but this time, everything felt different. She did not walk in like a rejected girl. She stepped forward like a rising queen. The tears she once shed were now replaced by courage. Her hands clutched the wooden pendant Elder Zawadi had given her years ago. As she stood in the center of the hall, something strange and powerful happened. The pendant began to glow softly, its light shimmering in the presence of the palace walls. Gasps filled the room. The elders leaned forward in shock, and even Prince Kulan stood from his seat. The glow of the pendant was no ordinary thing. It was a sacred symbol, one only known to the royal bloodline of Njoro. Elder Zawadi, with calm authority, stepped forward and addressed the court. Years ago, he began, this pendant was carved for a woman named Kenua, the one chosen by the spiritual council to become Njoro's spiritual queen. But due to political betrayal and threats on her life, she escaped the kingdom and vanished. That woman was Iyira's mother. The hall fell into stunned silence. All eyes turned to Iyira. She is not just a girl from Zalunga, Zawadi continued. She is the rightful heir of the sacred line. The light within her is not just talent. It is legacy. Her mother's spirit lives through her, and no lie or hatred can dim that. Prince Kulan was speechless. The pendant had confirmed it. The royal elders nodded, acknowledging the truth with deep respect. Iyira's identity had been hidden for years beneath pain and mistreatment, but now her light had finally been revealed for the world to see. In Zalunga, the news spread like wildfire. The same villagers who once whispered behind Iyira's back now danced and sang her name in the streets. Women wept with joy. Children chanted, "Iyira the light, Iyira the light." Meanwhile, Lenda, who had poisoned Iyira's life for years, was now exposed and disgraced. She was taken back to Zalunga by royal guards. Her head bowed in shame. Her lies, cruelty and schemes had all crumbled before the truth. Her own children watched in silence as their mother was stripped of her pride. The villagers who once feared her now looked at her with pity and disgust. Iyira's journey had come full circle, from pain to purpose, from silence to glory. She had risen above every wound, every slap, every insult, and now the world saw her not as a cursed girl, but as a woman born to lead, born to shine. The past that once chained her had become the very fire that forged her strength, and in the palace of Njoro, the name Iyira was now spoken with honor, not pity. Iyira stood before thousands, her head held high, wearing the royal robe of honor and the same wooden pendant that once glowed in her darkest hour. She was no longer the girl who cried in silence, nor the one who was beaten and humiliated. She had become the Lady of Wisdom, a symbol of grace, strength, and triumph. The people cheered her name, not just in Njoro, but in every corner of the land, from Kafuro to Jolobi, from Zalunga to the deepest valleys where her story had once been whispered with pity. Now it was sung with pride. Prince Kulan, deeply moved by her journey, appointed her as his royal advisor. He said, "There is no better mind to guide a kingdom than one that has risen from dust and walked through fire." Iyira brought not just beauty and intelligence to the palace. She brought heart, empathy, and change. Her wisdom influenced new laws that protected the poor, uplifted women, and gave power to the voiceless. She became the voice she never had during her own suffering. But Iyira's mission was far from over. In the memory of her beloved mother, she founded a sanctuary called Kanua's Home for the Broken. It was a shelter for abused girls, orphans, and anyone cast aside by life. There, young girls were taught to read, write, dream, and most importantly, to heal. Iyira visited the home often, sitting with the girls, sharing stories, wiping tears, and reminding them that pain did not define their future. During the opening ceremony of the shelter, Iyira stepped forward to speak. The crowd stood still, eyes fixed on the woman who had once walked barefoot to the palace gates. Her voice, soft but powerful, echoed across the courtyard. "No child should be punished for another's sins," she said, "and no soul deserves to be silenced by pain. I was beaten by life, but I beat destiny with hope." Tears rolled down cheeks. Elders nodded. Even the youngest children in the crowd felt the weight of her words. It was more than a speech. It was a call for healing, a call for change. The tale of Iyira began to travel far beyond borders. Traders, farmers, chiefs, and even traveling griots carried her story in songs and poems. Her rise became a beacon for every girl sitting under a tree dreaming of a better life, for every woman who had been told she was worthless, for every heart that had been crushed, but still dared to beat. And so, Iyira's name was etched in the hearts of the people, not just as a royal figure, but as a living legend. Her life became proof that even those born in sorrow could rise in glory, that even those scarred by the past could become healers of the future. She didn't just rewrite her own destiny, she rewrote destiny for generations to come. If Iyira's story touched your heart, then take a moment to breathe in her journey, the pain, the strength, the courage, and the victory. How many Iyiras are still out there today, silently suffering, unheard, unloved, and unseen? How many daughters are blamed for the sins they never committed? How many dreams are buried under the weight of cruelty and injustice? Iyira rose, not because life was kind to her, but because she chose to keep going even when the world turned its back on her. She became the voice for every broken soul, the light for every girl trapped in darkness. If this story moved you, if it made your heart ache, your eyes tear up, or your spirit feel stronger, then don't let it stop here. Let Iyira's voice reach someone who needs hope today. Like this video, share it with someone who needs strength, and subscribe to our channel so these powerful stories of resilience and healing never stop reaching hearts like yours. Your one click, your one share, your one kind act could change another Iyira's life. Let's spread the light.
कपूस बन के रहे ये ठहरे तेरे मताम सारे को नहीं भुगती दे समझ आनी पे ते अपने काम से तवज्जो दे बंदा बन इंसान बन मेहनत तो ठीक पिया करना है समझ आनी पे ते 8 दिहाड़े हिको जी मेहनत वक्त तक पता नुकसान दे लिए सही है समझ आंदी पे क्योंकि थोड़ी सी चेंजिंग हो गए चेंजिंग करे से अपने आप को चेंज बनाए से तो चेंज थी से जरूरी है न तो जिमें कपूस है तो कपूस ही रस है जरूरी है समझ आ गई है बाकी परेशानी दी कोई गाल का नहीं ठीक है लेक्चर जड़ा तक मैं देना पिया एक पल्ले पा इन्हें ते अमल दरामद कर तू जरूरी है तेरा हक बनता है जरूरी है समझ आई ते कोई भी काम कीता उन्हें जो बाहर नहीं करनी उन्हें भूलना नहीं समझ आती पे ते बाकी मैं को भी तंग नहीं करना इतने जितने भी वतन तंग कहीं को नहीं करना जी दा जवाब देता तो अगे भी मैं समझाया कि तक समझ नहीं आती क्योंकि तेरी मुंगरी जो जाइए चिबी ते अल्लाह करे से हुन तक समझ आंदी है थोड़ी बहुत समझे ना गाल ताले हर बंदा बन ते बडेरे दा फोन सुन गन हाल बैठा तो वे के ना आवे सवेरे आसे आज तक पता नहीं उन्हें कंफर्म है या कहानी
एक को रत्या गोलियां ला एक को पैकेट मिला 160 का देता हूं पैकेट जितना गिनूं लेकिन वो और मिलिया रत्या गोलियां नहीं को गिदा है मैं था अच्छा डब्बे डब्बे गन सुन सवेरे
अच्छा डब्बी आवे
अच्छा महीना में गिने जैसे पहले 10 गोलियां रखाओ डब्बे डब्बे पे सवेरे चावल मचा के इंसान
भला आवाज़ सुनी
160 का है तो डब्बे आसे तकरीबन 1500 दे आसे 10 पत्ते डब्बे पता नहीं कितने पत्ते हैं दा ही होसन अगे दा लइए तो 10 पत्ते कितने आसे आज चलो 1200 दे कितने आसे 1000 एक दे 1200 एक दे समझा आज चलो मतार कंसन सवेरे जो वैसा
अच्छा
तो 1250 दे ये जा आज चलो गन कंसन ठीक है
ओके
हाँ बारिश थोड़ी थोड़ी आने खड़ी है
थोड़ी है लेकिन आसे सही
ना आसे
बस ठीक है वीडियो बन गई भी कटांदा पिया
काट जा